I am Nisha Charles and I am your presenter for today. Thank you for joining us for SAT TV News. Among the major developments, 2 new cruise ships make inaugural calls to Dominica, Guyana and Suriname to support Palestinian statehood at the UN. Twin bomb blast shake Damascus suburb, and in sports, the Dominica Grammar School has been crowned champions of the 2012 Sports Division Under 15 football competition. Details of these and other stories after the break. Thank you for staying with us. Now for the details of the news. In light of the upcoming play on the Dread Act era, the public will now know a bit more of that period. In an interview on the issue, Mr. Nicholas George, a member of the Dominican public and one who is aware of what took place during the Dread Act period, gave his insight on that point in time. He recalls a time when police and Rastas could not see eye to eye. The Rastas felt that the smoking of marijuana should be legalized, but the police had a different feeling.
The police was empowered to enforce the law that criminalized the use, possession of marijuana, pure and simple. So that created conflict. But over the years, that conflict started to dissipate to the point where I was the coordinator of an organization called the Police Organization for Youth Development. And boy, so you remember, there you go. And I dare say that those children grew up to be responsible adults in our society.
He said the act did not just get passed in Parliament, but there were events that led up to the act. The era leading up to the Dread Act included the Landed Era from 1493 to 1961, National Liberalization from 1961 to 1973, and Black Power Intellectual Revolution.
That if you wanted a job in the Royal Bank, you had to have a certain color, and you had to be of a certain class, of the landed class. And Mr. Leblanc began to structurally break down that class. And he re-energized interest in culture, so that today you have the E.O. Leblanc shield being presented to people at the cultural gala.
According to Mr. George, the Dread Act gained its momentum from the Black Power Intellectual Revolution. There were a large number of African revolutions taking place at the time, and in Dominica the black identified with and started to revolt. Soon after that came the Rastafarian movement, where marijuana was introduced to Dominica.
Rastafarianism was preached as a religion, and part of that religion in the ritual was the smoking of marijuana. Hence the conflict between them and the police. The act that criminalized the possession of marijuana in Dominica was Act number 23 of 1969. So we now have the Drug Act, all right? But we had Act number 23 of 1969 that criminalized the use of marijuana.
A law was passed that said that no one was to be in possession of marijuana, but the Rastafarians had marijuana as part of their religion, and this caused conflict. The Dread Act were some of the Rastafarian groups who took more of an intellectual approach and began to enforce the freedom and liberalization of Africa, which to them included Dominica.
Marijuana was already being planted, but they began taking the land. Now they took the land of the ordinary farmer and were saying to them, get back to Zion, to Babylon. So nous c'est nom te, and we have to stay up there, and you have to go back. That kind of action brought and instilled fear in the population. Serious fear.
By that time, some farmers had been killed because they resisted the Dreads. The enforcement of the Dread Act had the highest psychological impact on anyone in the Caribbean. The Dread Act simply allowed the police to enforce other acts that had been neglected. The act was meant to prohibit the suppression of society for public order and public morality. The play, The Dread Act by Théâtre Pawal, will be done at the Arak House of Culture on December 9, 2012. Evangelist Peter R. Augustine, who just returned from a trip to French Guiana, says it was a tremendous privilege for him, especially as it was a fruitful journey. He says the purpose of the trip was an evangelistical outreach which was necessary.
For one thing, our objectives were to establish 2 new churches in areas where there were no churches before. And by God's grace, this was done. A large number of people got saved. We saw the Lord move in mysterious ways, divine healings and deliverances, and for that we are so thankful. But you see, the Word of God says that we are ambassadors for Christ. But of course, in the process, we also represent our nation.
Pastor Augustine stated that he was also very privileged to meet with a florist who happens to own the largest flower shop in French Guiana. He said this is so because after their talks, it resulted in the florist wanting to do business with people who grow anthurium lilies. Pastor Augustine mentioned the florist wants to purchase 1,000 to 2,000 lilies each week, so he is tasked to get in touch with local florists who can meet the demand.
So that I can arrange a date for the lady to come to Dominica to meet with them and to share her thoughts and vision. She said the lilies would be sent to Martinique via a boat, and then they would be flown over to French Guiana. And so this is another objective which maybe I did not plan for, but since I am so concerned about Dominica and what is taking place in here, I thought it was a tremendous opportunity. In fact, the lady is a member of one of the churches that I ministered into, and she is desirous of coming down to Dominica to begin this enterprise.
He says it is a perfect opportunity for Dominican florists who grow lilies to benefit from. Head of governments of the OACS who meet in Dominica over the weekend has re-emphasized concerns regarding the manner in which the Canadian authorities implemented the visa restriction applicable to citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia. These came when, on September 12, 2012, the Canadian government implemented the visa requirements due to what they consider as unreliable travel documents are used by nationals of the 2 countries. The Canadian government also stated that criminals from these countries can legally change their names and acquire new passports, and in some instances, people who were removed from Canada as security risks later returned using different passports. There has also been an unacceptable high number of asylum claims from St. Lucia and St. Vincent, with about 1.5% and 3% of the population of these countries making asylum claims in Canada over the past 5 years. In response to this action by the Canadian authorities, St. Vincent Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves says the OACS sees the matter as troubling and unreasonable.
We must record and reaffirm our profound concern about the manner in which the Canadian authorities implemented the visa restriction and the visa restriction itself. And we are asking, of course, all our citizens who are going to visit Canada to follow the laws and practices related to immigration in Canada. But we have to record, reiterate, as I said, our profound concern about this visa imposition. We consider it unreasonable, and we think that it ought not to have been done, and certainly not done in the manner in which it was done.
In light of this, the Prime Minister urged citizens who intend to visit Canada to do so in accordance with the law and immigration procedures of that country. Mr. Gonsalves applauded the European mission for its decision to include Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent and St. Lucia in the Schengen visa waiver arrangements. This has already been granted to Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis for visits to the Schengen member states for periods of up to 90 days.
It will take about 3 to 6 months for all of this matter to be properly put in place, because you have to have individual memoranda of understanding to put it on a proper juridical footing. But what the European Commission is saying that they're quite satisfied with all the arrangements we have with all our travel documents and everything else. There's nothing unreliable about them. And that is part of the process of opening up in this global village. They are waiving the Schengen visa requirements.
The Schengen Area's agreement comprises of European countries including Germany, Spain, Belgium, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Spain, Sweden and Switzerland, among others. Ms. Gonsalves pointed out that a non-legislative sitting of the OECS Assembly is to be convened in February of 2013. This non-legislative sitting will address the rules and procedures of the Assembly they have adopted, and they will also debate the OECS development strategies which exist. There will also be discussions on the freedom of movement within the Economic Union.
We are hoping to have next year early a second meeting of the OECS Assembly, but this one will address a number of legislative matters which are to be announced early in the new year. I want to indicate that we put a lot of weight on the citizens of our countries grasping the importance of what this assembly is about. As part of a consultative mechanism, a legislative filter in the process of lawmaking in the areas of the Economic Union, in which the revised Treaty of Bastille establishing the Economic Union provide for lawmaking in certain designated areas.
Mr. Gonsalves highlighted that a few months ago Martinique and Guadeloupe applied for associate membership of the OECS. With this, an OECS negotiation team has been established which has completed work in preparing various negotiating briefs and is ready to commence negotiations with the teams of the two countries. He says this is very important strategic development and the teams will commence negotiations very soon. We now join Larry for a report.
The MV Ada Luna of Ada Cruises along with the MV Saga Sapphire of Saga Cruises made their inaugural call to Dominica, which was done on Wednesday, November 20th, 2012. The MV Ada Luna of Ada Cruises, which was docked at the Rosa cruise ship berth, welcomed a team of officials in the tourism industry along with media personnel for the inaugural ceremony, which included a plaque exchange. Chief Executive Officer of the Discover Dominica Authority, DDA, and Director of Tourism, Mr. Colin Piper, in welcoming the ship said he hopes this will be one of many calls to the nature island of the Caribbean, Dominica.
The cruise industry is very critical to Dominica in terms of its tourism product. We will be welcoming some 162 calls this year, which is, and we expect to improve that even or increase that into the next year.
Chief Executive Officer of the Dominica Air and Seaport Authority, Mr. Benoit Bardouille, pointed out that we value the business and consistency these ships bring to Dominica, as they will be making 9 calls this tourist season. He said the ships will be repeating these calls for 2013 and have already committed themselves for the 2014 and 2015 tourist season.
We value the relationship with AIDA because the clientele that AIDA moves are persons who have a love for nature in terms of what Dominica has to offer. As you know, we are the nature island of the Caribbean. The greenest thing that you can see anywhere in the Caribbean, nothing matches what Dominica has. And as Mr. Piper indicated to you earlier, we are 1,000+ shades of green. So we lost the count on numbers when we start talking about the greenness of the country.
Mr. Bardouille used the time to make a sales speech as he challenged the ship's captain that with the new 500,000-gallon water tank, which was recently commissioned in Montrose, we have the potential to provide clean water at a competitive rate.
which means that we can guarantee you a supply. And not only can we guarantee you a supply, but the quality of the supply is also important. On that line, there's a filtration system which has been put in, not only for the ships, but for the citizenry of the country, which means that you can have quality potable water at any time that you're docked alongside. So, Captain, I want to invite you one of those days to start looking at that option vis-a-vis the option of you generating your own water when you get into Dominica.
Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and Legal Affairs, Mrs. Claudia Bellot, added, "We pride ourselves with a rich history of conserving our natural resources, as we value what God has blessed us with and need to maintain it for now and future generations."
You know that Dominica offers nature and adventure in terms of tourism. Hiking, we have just completed the Waitikobuli National Trail, which runs from the south to the north of the island and takes you through some of the most scenic landscapes of Dominica. And those who do not want to exert themselves in that kind of activity can simply relax, rejuvenate, and enjoy the beauty that Dominica has to offer. So we are very happy to have you. The Ministry of Tourism works very closely with all of the stakeholders in tourism to ensure that our product, our sites, our facilities are kept at a very high standard so that our visitors can enjoy the nature and the beauty of Dominica.
Captain of the Ada Luna says he is delighted that the ship will be making calls to Dominica.
And the German passengers are also glad to be in Dominica to see what's happened on your islands. It's like tropical and rainfalls, and it looks very nature. And I think that's the feeling which the Germans like, back to the nature. Not in the big cities.
This liner is 827 feet long with a passenger capacity of 2,100 with 607 crew members. The MV Saga Sapphire of Saga Cruises, which also made an inaugural call, was docked at the Deepwater Harbor in Fonkole. It is 658 feet long with a passenger capacity of 752 with 415 crew members. Cruise tourism is a major component of Dominica's growing tourism sector. A total of 297,626 cruise passengers from 194 cruise ship calls visited Dominica during the 2011-2012 cruise ship season. Approximately 159 cruise ships are expected to call at Dominica's port during the 2012-2013 season, bringing nearly 229,526 visitors to the island. This is Larry Larrock on the Rosa cruise ship berth, where the Ada Luna was welcomed by Dominica tourism officials for its inaugural call to Dominica.
Thank you, Larry, for that report. Getting to zero new infections and zero AIDS-related deaths. That's the theme for the upcoming World AIDS Day 2012, which will be celebrated on Saturday, December 1st. National HIV and AIDS Coordinator Mrs. Julie Frampton is always of the view that having a multi-sectorial collaborative approach is the way to go in fighting the HIV/AIDS epidemic.
That the region is doing very well in terms of managing the epidemic. But we have to continue to do this with the support of the media, with the support of all our partners, and for us to achieve the goal of maintaining or leveling off, if for want of a better expression, of the number of new HIV cases that we see in the region, as well as the decrease in the number of deaths.
As part of the celebration of World AIDS Day, a radio address will be given on that day by the National HIV and AIDS Response Unit, and the candlelight ceremony will take place at the Winter Park Sports Stadium. Mrs. Frampton says stigma and discrimination is the main reason why people do not come to get tested or receive treatment, and we need to change our attitudes towards the issue.
And that is no different to violence or gender-based violence, and you'd wonder what HIV has to do with gender-based violence in terms of disclosure to partners, in terms of persons looking at infidelity, yes, it has a lot to do with HIV and gender-based violence. So we want to encourage persons for us to continue to work together to have or achieve our goal in our theme, getting to zero new infections, zero discrimination, and zero AIDS-related deaths.
The highlight for her leading up to World AIDS Day is getting men to be tested on the 29th of November 2012. This is because the unit continues to see the highest incidence of infections among men, standing at 72%.
So we really want to encourage our men to get tested. We want to encourage our men to change behaviors, and as well as encourage lifestyles that will minimize new infections of HIV. We'll also be having hopefully a movie night at the stadium. We'll be featuring the Magic Johnson story, because people think that, you know, maybe it's not true, he's not HIV. Yes, he is living with HIV.
They will also be collaborating with the public library to have activities where persons not only come to read, but to get information on HIV and AIDS. On November the 27th, 2012, an evening was held for the anniversary of the death of our late Jeff Joseph. Born Jefferson Oswald Joseph in the village of St. Joseph, he will be remembered for his contribution to the culture and music of Dominica. Mr. Sobers Esprit, who represents the Dominica Festivals Committee, said Jeff was not only a great musical icon, but he was a great human being, and for that we should celebrate his life.
Because Jeff meant so much to us, and so much to the world, that we have to do something concrete. We have to create something concrete for his memory. And so we are speaking with the family about doing a few things, and we will be rolling them out a little later. But I want to say on behalf of the DFC, to Mr. Joseph, to the family, thank you very much for giving us Jeff. We owe you a debt of gratitude, because he did so much for us and he made us proud. So tonight, we celebrate his life.
The St. Joseph Parliamentary Representative, Honorable Kelver Darroux, says though he was rather young when Jeff, Joe and Grandma started, the impact that they had on St. Joseph was tremendous.
And all this is to say that no matter where you come from, no matter what your background or the circumstances that you were raised in, once you have a vision, a goal, and a plan for your life, you are able to achieve anything. And I believe this is a message that Jeff Joseph would like to leave, particularly for the young people of St. Joseph. Because too many times we feel that we are challenged, we feel that the world owes us something, or somebody has to do something for us. But here we saw a young man from this community being raised, being groomed, and find out what his talent was.
He urges his fellow villagers that no matter where they come from, they should find their talents and work hard to master it, and then it will take them places. Mrs. Ophelia Marie, who has worked with Jeff, says he tirelessly captured the beat of the Kada's music. No one knew where his energy came from, but Mrs. Marie says he evolved into a stage machine that captured his crowd.
Jeff was an assembler of persons. He demonstrated the power of uniting and making us do things together. Levez la main, levez la main, levez la main. Even the bishop said it at his funeral. And Pala and Paisi, you just cannot forget Jeff. And he's crié, something, and he had a kind of something in his voice, you know, that used to come out before he started singing Koshma. That kind of thing was Jeff.
Jeff Joseph died on November 23rd at La Minade Hospital in Martinique in 2011. He has left an incredible mark on the cultural landscape in Dominica and the French Caribbean. He is gone, but his memory and music will be cherished forever. This has been the local segment of the news. Coming up next, regional highlights.